Okay, so on to the next set of photo. I said I was going to do some long exposure. I lied. I lied because now I'm going to do some HDR. Before I continue, I'm going to do a +2 on this photo. Yeah, I'm going to set the rating on +2. And, oh, actually, I had done it before already. It's just that it's so small that yes, that's the point. It's so, when you put it so small, you don't see the stars. Okay, so I'm going to put it just a size where I could see the stars. Now, next, I did some HDR, and let me press the I key. This is the normal exposure, 1/60th of a second at 7.1. And this is the underexposed. The only thing that changes is the speed, 1/250th of a second, so much faster, so less light, so darker photo. And then this one, 1/15th of a second, much longer, much more light, a brighter photo. Now check this out. This is 160, this is the same basically. 160, 1250, and 115. Okay, so it's basically the same thing. And one thing that I did is that while I was on the tripod, I first did an HDR, so 1, 2, and 3. And then I did all these long exposure shots. So they have the exact, same framing composition. So if I want to mix between long exposure, digital blending, that I'll show you later, and HDR, I can if I want to. I'm not sure I'm going to do that, but I can. Okay, so to do the HDR, I'm going to press the I key. I do a little bit of retouching on all 3 photos before going into Photomatix, which is the software I go to for HDR. That's my workflow again, that's just me. What am I going to do? I'm going to open up the shadows and the highlights, but not as much as I would on a regular photo. I just want to see a bit, more a bit what's going on here. Okay. One thing that I do is that I'm going to put the white balance to cloudy like we did. That's very important for me to do the white balance before going into Photomatix. So I did the same thing, cloudy plus 18. I'm going to do the filter, on the top here. I'm going to just lower a bit the exposure on the top to get even more of the sun, of the sunset before going into Photomatix. One thing I'm also going to do is noise corrections. You see, doing HDR is going to get you lots of noise. So I'm going to do some serious noise correction on this one. I'm going to go 40 and 100% on colors. Okay. So that's all I did, just a little bit here. I got the sunset to be a bit more present, and I took out the noise and I changed the white balance. Now I'm going to select all 3 other photos. I'm going to click on sync. Oh, hold on. Let me just, did I go out? Yeah, I was out. I wanted to see if I was out. No, I was not. Here, done. Out of this ND filter tool. Okay, I've got all 3 photos selected. I'm going to click on sync. Make sure check all is on, and I'm going to click on synchronize. But before I go into Photomatix, I'm going to inspect this photo. Okay, this one is a bit dark. So it's a -2, but I'm going to brighten up here a little bit. And I'm going to go to the noise correction. And I'm going to go 100% on the noise here to take out any noise. Because usually when you do HDR, most of the noise comes from the underexposed photo. On the overexposed photo, I think I'm not going to do much. I'm just going to leave it as such. Okay. So now that I've done a little bit of retouching, I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to export to Photomatix Pro. That's an export preset that you have when you install Photomatix. So I'm going to call this HDR Sunset Notre Dame HDR. Output format 16-bit is perfect for me. Reducing ghost artifact. I'm not going to go on high. I'm going to go on normal. There's not much ghosting happening here. Reduce noise, underexposed image only. That's fine. Reduce chromatic aberration. That's fine. Okay, so let's click on export. So it's going to get all these 3 photos out of Lightroom into Photomatix. And once I'm into Photomatix, I'm going to put on pause, and I'm coming back when we are ready to do some tone mapping. Okay, so here we are in Photomatix. Now my workflow is pretty straightforward and simple. Once I'm into Photomatix, I go to micro contrast and I put it the whole way to 100. That's just my workflow again, guys. I'm not saying that's the way you should do it. That's the way that I'm doing it. Smoothing. I click on light mode and I go to high or max. If you go on the other way, if you go to minimum or low, you get a very not natural effect. So I don't like that. So I'm going to go to max, or I'm going to go to high. Okay. So high, I think is cool. Usually I lower down a bit the gamma to make it a bit darker. And then I go to saturation highlights and I boost the saturation in the highlights. I kind of like that. Okay, we have the white balance that we did before. And that's why it's very important to do the white balance before you go to photomatics. Because the white balance is really, you know, the overall color feel of a photo. So you got to get it perfect. And the best way to get it perfect is to do it with raw files in Lightroom, not anywhere else. So let's click on save and re-import, and let's go back to Lightroom. Let's put on pause until it's back into Lightroom. So it's re-importing to Lightroom. That's the way it looks. Now, usually when it's just cooked out of Photomatics, it lacks of contrast. So let's check the histogram. Let's do I'm not going to do the shadows and highlights because that's the whole purpose of Photomatics, is to get all the info in the shadows and the highlights. This is the HDR result. This is the normal exposure. You see how this is dark and how this is. Let me put this. You can select both and click on C so you can see both. That's the HDR and that's the normal version. If I click here on the shadows, we can see now that we can see everything that's happening here. Well, this is very dark. Now it's not too noisy. It's kind of cool. So the HDR is on the left. Now look on the sunshine, we see a lot more of the sun. So, okay, so that's the HDR. Now, what I usually do on the HDR one is that I'm gonna go and do the whites and the blacks. I'm gonna put the option key and boost a bit the whites maybe, and do the option key and boost a bit the blacks, you know, just to give it a bit more contrast and maybe even add some contrast. Okay, so that's kind of better. So we have that's the HDR and that's the normal one. Okay, but that was the original normal retouching. That's the HDR. You know, it's kind of like I don't like so much the HDR look. So one thing you can do, which is funny to do, is you can take the one that's normal again and finish retouching it. So this way, I'm just, you know, I remember how I just put the shadows to 50 and the highlights to -50. Now I'm going to go the whole way. I'm going to do the whites and the blacks, just like we did before. You know, even to speed things up, I could take this one, for example. It's a little trick I give you. I could take this one, and I could, I could click on Command Shift C. That's going to call copy settings. I'm going to take everything copy, and then I'm going to go into the normal one, which is this one, and I'm going to go Command V. And it's going to basically take everything that we did in the first photo and sync it to this one. Now, it's basically the same exposure. We get a pretty similar result, right? So now, this is the HDR one. This is the normal one. I kind of prefer the normal one, but there's some stuff I like in the HDR one. So the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I have the same cropping on both photos. So for that, I'm going to press Command Shift C again. I'm going to click check none. Check none. Process. Okay, and I'm just going to click on crop. Okay, so I have taken the crop option in memory of this photo. I'm going to go to the HDR one and I'm going to press Command V, just so I copy and paste the same cropping. So now we have the exact same cropping. And one thing you can do is take both of these photos, right click, edit in, open as layers in Photoshop, and basically open anyway. The whole idea is that I'm gonna mix both, you know, retouch. I have one which is natural and I have another one which is not natural. Okay, now I don't see anything because my screen is not, okay, here it is. All right, so what do we have here? Layers. The top one is the HDR one. Okay, let me put this, I'm gonna put this on the other screen so I can show you the before and after. So that's without the HDR, that's the HDR, that's without the HDR. Okay, now one thing that I do is, what do I like in the HDR? Why don't I kind of want to try a mix of two. Let's see if I lower the opacity. Let me put this back here so you can see what I'm doing. If I lower the opacity of the first layer, okay, let me just put this here. Okay, if I lower the opacity, I get a mix of both. This is at 0%, this is 100%. Okay. Now I really like the way I retouched this one in a normal way. I kind of like it more than the HDR, but that's why I'm showing you all that so you can see the before and after. So you know what? What I like about the SGR is what? I like how it's a bit brighter here. That I like. Let's see. I kind of like here a little bit. So you know what? I'm going to put a mask on. All right. So I'm going to create a mask, a black mask. So I'm pressing the Option key here. So now my HDR photo is totally gone. I want to get it back here. I kind of like what I did here a little bit. So I'm going to take a brush with B. Make sure that I'm on a black mask. Black mask is stopping everything. The whole HDR is hidden. And I'm going to put, this is the first color is white. And opacity, I'm going to go, yeah, maybe like 60%. And I'm just going to paint here with some whites on the mask, making sure it's on the mask. Okay, see, I'm painting here on the mask. Just to get some of the HDR look that I like. Let me put this on the side. That I like here. Kind of like how it does to the sky. How it gets more detailed here in the sky. Okay, so now I've got sort of best of both worlds. I've got the HDR mixed up with the normal exposure. Okay, I kind of like that. So, okay, I'm going to close this. I'm going to save it. And it was just to show you that you don't have to get stuck with an HDR. If you don't like it, you can simply, you know, mix it up with the normal retouching by, you know, just like what I did. So now we've got several photos to choose on. We have this one. Okay, we have this one, which is just a pure HDR. I'm going to put 2 on it. I'm going to rate it at 2. Then we've got this again. Now this is the same, basically the same in this one. It's just a normal exposure. And then we have got the mixed up of both. Mixed up of the HDR and then mixed up of the normal retouching. So we've got 3 photos so far. So if I filter all my photos, let me show you. That's the normal photo. That's just a pure HDR, and that's a mix of the normal photo and the HDR. Okay. In the next video, we're gonna continue and tackle the lone exposure ones and see what we can do with these ones.